All right, so have you ever wondered if studying something really, really hard, like physics, can actually, well, rewire your brain? It's a fascinating question. Someone actually asked this online, and the answers that came back from real physicists were just incredible. They revealed this amazing mental toolkit that honestly anyone can use. So let's dive in and break down exactly how they learn to think. So this is the post that started it all. A professor tells their class, hey, studying physics is going to turn your brains upside down. And you got to ask, right? What in the world does that actually mean? Well, if you ask a bunch of physicists, the answer you get is a big, resounding yes. It absolutely does. So that's not the question. The real question is how? Okay, so the first big piece of this puzzle is learning how to deconstruct the impossible. I mean, physicists are trained to look at a problem that just seems completely overwhelming. And instead of panicking or, just giving up, they have this very specific technique for finding the simplest way forward.
And they have this fantastic name for it, which I just love, maximal sleeves. Now, I know it sounds a little bit cheeky, right? But as one Reddit user, an astrophysicist, explains, this isn't about being lazy at all. No, it's about being ruthlessly efficient. It's about learning to focus only on what truly, truly matters in a problem. So let's be super clear about what this means. Maximal sleaze is really just the art of simplification. It's about strategically ignoring all the messy, non-essential details. Think about it like this. If you're trying to figure out how a baseball flies through the air, do you really need to calculate the gravitational pull of Jupiter? Or the rotation of the Earth? For most problems, of course not. That's just noise. This whole idea is about finding the simplest model that still gets you a useful answer. And there's actually a classic way they train you to do this, a famous technique called the Fermi problem. It's named after the physicist Enrico Fermi, and these problems are designed literally from day one to force you into this maximal sleaze way of thinking. And this is probably the most famous one of all. How many piano tuners are there in Chicago? Look, the whole point here is not to get the exact perfect number. I mean, nobody expects you to know that off the top of your head. The real goal is to see if you can logically break it down. You start asking questions. Okay, what's the population of Chicago? How many families are there? What percentage of them might own a piano? How often do you need to tune one? How many can a single tuner handle in a year? See, the final number isn't nearly as important as the logical chain you build to get there. And you see this technique everywhere. People in the thread were sharing all sorts of these Fermi-style questions their professors would throw at them. Each one, whether it's jelly beans in a stadium or light bulbs on campus, forces you to do the same thing, make some reasonable assumptions, and build an estimate from scratch. It's all about turning a ridiculously huge question into a bunch of small, manageable steps. So this whole focus on estimating instead of getting exact answers, well, that leads us perfectly into the second major mental shift, and that is the art of approximation. It's all about learning to embrace the power of good enough. And this seems to be a really common experience for physics students. You go into it thinking you're going to find these perfect, beautiful, elegant formulas that describe absolutely everything. But as this user points out, the reality is the universe is messy. And a lot of the time, the super exact calculations are either flat out impossible or, frankly, they're just not that useful. And here is the big counterintuitive twist. This user absolutely nails it. An approximate answer that gets you in the right ballpark is often way more useful than a perfectly exact one. Why? Because it gives you a deeper feel for what's going on. It's about seeing the big picture, the general principle, instead of getting bogged down in a million tiny details. Which brings us to another great piece of slang they use, guesstimating. It's exactly what it sounds like, a mix of guessing and estimating, and it's basically a superpower. It's the ability to make a reasonable ballpark judgment, even when you don't have all the information. When your boss asks, is this project going to take 2 weeks or 2 months? Guesstimating is what lets you do that quick mental math to land on a realistic answer. It's fast, it's practical, and honestly, a lot of the time, it's all you really need. Okay, so we've got these technical skills, right? Breaking things down, making good estimates, but what about the mindset behind it all? The third piece of this whole puzzle is, well, it's psychological. It's about building up an emotional resilience to being uncertain and, let's be honest, to feeling completely and totally lost. I think this comment from user Pandemonium really gets to the heart of it. I've learned how to be comfortable with feeling stupid. I mean, wow. When you're studying something like physics, you are constantly living at the very edge of what you understand. And learning to be okay with that feeling, to not freak out when you don't immediately know the answer, that might be the single most important skill you learn. And that comfort, that willingness to sit with not knowing, allows for something that another user calls fuzzy thinking. And again, just like maximal sleaze, this does not mean sloppy thinking. It's actually a very structured way to deal with uncertainty. So here's how it basically works in practice. You're holding a few different possibilities in your head at the same time. You think, okay, this result is probably caused by X if we assume Y and Z are true. But you also think, well, it could be Q if these other things are true instead. So you proceed with what seems most likely, but, and this is the really critical part, you never forget the assumptions you made. You're always on the lookout for anything that might prove you wrong. It's this amazing blend of being decisive, but also intellectually humble. So when you put all of these pieces together, right, the deconstruction, the approximation, that comfort with chaos, you don't just end up with a new set of skills. What you get is something much bigger. It fundamentally changes your entire worldview. It's like you've unlocked this set of mental superpowers. You get what one person called intellectual robustness. Hard concepts just don't intimidate you anymore because you have a system for tackling them. You gain this deep confidence that you can learn pretty much anything. And you start to see connections between different fields, thinking on all these different scales at once, from the tiniest particles all the way up to the entire cosmos. But there is a little warning that comes with all this. Gaining this powerful new way of seeing the world, well, it isn't without its, let's call them quirks. It can change how you experience normal, everyday stuff, sometimes in pretty funny ways. And I absolutely love this quote from user Cordophonic because it's so true. Once you understand physics, movie special effects can kind of lose their magic. Your brain it can't help itself. It starts doing the math in the background. You see a car fly through the air and a little voice in your head goes, no, the momentum doesn't work like that. You're sitting there trying so hard to just enjoy the movie, but your brain won't let you. It's a small price to pay, I guess. So to circle all the way back and answer that original question, what does it mean to have your brain turned upside down by physics? Well, it's not some weird magical thing. It's about getting a very real, very powerful, and totally transferable mental toolkit. It's a new way to see the world, to understand it more deeply, and to solve its most complex problems a little more effectively. And so that kind of leaves us with one final thought, a question for you, really. If you were to take these ideas, maximal sleaze, guesstimating, fuzzy thinking, what's one impossible problem in your own life or your work that you could start to unravel right now? Just something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.